Welcome everybody and welcome to another Simon on the Sofa. And today I am with, hopefully some of you maybe have watched the little warm-up that I've been introducing this wonderful man to you, but I'm with a wonderful man in my mind anyway, in my vision of where we are right now, a great filmmaker and a man with a wonderful voice, Ian MacKenzie. Ian MacKenzie, hey, welcome, hello.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, for people, if it's the first time you've ever tuned in with a Simon on the Sofa, then I show up with beautiful people that I am inspired by normally, and that I would love to have a conversation with, and also people that I feel that I would love to bring a conversation to the world, an authentic, transparent conversation to the world. And if you've been following any of my own work, you know that I'm very passionate about where we are as humanity, this quest for truth that I'm exploring, and how love can really not just be a gimmick, but actually how there's a revolution of love taking place right now. This wonderful man, if you've heard of the film Occupy Love, was the producer of Occupy Love, and also, well, I've shared a load of his films, but his films very much, to me anyway, being an actor and a filmmaker myself, communicate beyond words actually, because the way that Ian uses image associated with voice has taken me on a much deeper journey and shares wisdom. So I want to just acknowledge you for that, Ian, anyway, of the films that I've thoroughly enjoyed on your website and what you've brought to the world. And Ian, I just start by just showing up and really just checking in with where you're at right this moment. I know it's in the morning for you there and night time for me, so maybe just a little, whatever's coming up for you, maybe what you'd want to share to the people viewing right now. We have this little 1 hour together to share to the world what's going on in our world right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. It's morning here on the west coast of Canada here. Recently, I actually just moved to a little cabin on one of the small islands. So right behind my computer screen here, I'm actually looking out at a beautiful lake, and I think there's some ducks making their way across the water, and still a bit of snow on the ground. We don't usually get too much snow out here on the west coast, but the snow here has stayed now for about a week, and it's very beautiful. So for me, I'm definitely feeling just a renewed sense of peace and place, as I actually moved out here probably for the next 3 or 4 months while I work on 2 of my major film projects that I'm sure we might get into here today.
Lovely. Lovely. So nice opportunity to work on 2 projects. Yeah, that'd be nice. I think one of the things I'd love us to maybe talk about a little bit, because I feel that from watching your lovely talk, which I don't know how many times I've watched it now, but the noosphere, your TEDx talk that you did in Victoria. Maybe if you feel this, if you're feeling this vibe as well, it might be nice to just maybe talk about this, you know, the love bomb and the meme of love, and just that stage that we're at in evolutionary development right now. If you'd just like to throw a few words in that, and maybe how that talk birthed, because I personally feel that talk, I want to get it up to the 1 million views, not just the 20,000.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my journey, I think, through to arrive at that was really from, I mean, I became a professional filmmaker in 2007 when a friend of mine actually came, he started this project called 1 Week Job. He was actually looking to find something he was passionate about. And I helped him launch the project, and he just put it out there, hey, can I work a job a week, initially in Canada? And people just started offering. They said, yeah, sure, you can come, you know, hang out on my dairy farm, or, you know, come become a fashion buyer, or like a lobster fisherman, or, you know, there's so many different jobs that people were like happy to share. And about halfway through that, this is a friend of mine. I've been friends since grade 4 or something. And he's like, "You should come on the road and start filming because it's just the adventures are just getting wackier." And so I bought a camera actually, and I followed him on the road. And before that, I never really thought I could be a filmmaker. It was more just a hobby. And we ended up cutting that whole year into a film called 1 Week Job, and we sold it to CBC, which is similar to the BBC out there and where you are. And so it aired at national TV across Canada and beyond. And from there, I really thought, wow, I think I could do this. About that same time, I started following the work of a fellow named Velcro Ripper, another fellow Canadian documentary filmmaker. And he had done 2 films, the first called Scared Sacred, which was him going to all the ground zeros of the world, from Hiroshima to New York City after 9/11. And he was really trying to find the silver lining in the mushroom cloud, as it's called, as the film was reviewed in that fashion. And it was quite a beautiful look at what can come from these very traumatic events, what kind of either beauty or transformation. And the second film was called Fierce Light, When Spirit Meets Action. And that one was really about looking at Gandhi's concept of soul force, this idea of spirituality grounded in activism, or you could say activism grounded in spirituality. This deep understanding that you can't have one without the other, that in fact they have to be fused together in this way of creating change. And to just have one is imbalanced. And if you're an activist that just rages against the machine, you burn out. But if you're into spirituality and just meditate all day, nothing gets done. And so that film, Fierce Light, really focused on all of the amazing people that were doing this type of work, this grounded spirituality. And finally, he started working on a film at the time. It was called Evolve Love. And he was really asking the question, well, where are we going? If everybody became, let's say, a spirit using soul force, where would we go? And at the time, I started following, I knew his work, but I saw he was working on this film, and so I reached out and I said, hey, can I help you on this film? And after a few more emails ensued, and finally he said yes. And I ended up going with him. Our first shoot was actually over the Canadian tar sands. So you've probably heard about those over there as well. They're basically the largest industrial project on the planet. You can see them from space. And that was, on the one hand, just viscerally devastating to fly over this war zone. It was really a ground zero, actually, for the type of economy that is rapacious in its need for energy. And at the same time, it really cemented, I think, Velcro and I's collaborative friendship. And I continued on with that project, shooting different scenes. We went to Cancun Climate Summit in Mexico. I went to New York City myself, actually, after Occupy burst on the scene in September in 2011. And at that moment, we didn't know that that's what the film would really begin to be about. We were just really looking at all these more, whether it was spiritual leaders or scientists, and asking them, what were we emerging into. But it didn't really have that sort of expressed, sense of what's actually unfolding until Occupy happened. And so that really, we say the film got occupied. And then over the next 2 years, really, we followed the movement for the first year, and then that became the film, Occupy Love. So the remnants of those other spiritual teachers and leaders and scientists and everybody is still in there, but the real core of the film is the first year of the Occupy movement and how it connects to Spain and Tahrir Square. So after it was actually something that Callie Lassen, the founder of Adbusters, he came up with this concept. You may have got it from somewhere as well, but he was the first time I heard it, this concept of mind bomb. This idea that sort of an idea that's so powerful that it just spreads and activates and unfolds. And for him, in Adbusters magazine, they've been doing that for years. They just keep trying all these different ideas. Buy Nothing Day, also, which I think is worldwide now, was also from them. Black Spot Sneakers, all these different ideas they tried. And Occupy was really just one more attempt. And it just caught on for whatever reason. And speaking with Calais, he even said, he's like, wow, I didn't realize, I hoped it would go this big, but I had no idea. And so when I came to have the opportunity for that talk, I really thought to myself, well, how could I reveal the architecture of change from the perspective of media, in that, we look at the web and we look at how many people are connected now and sharing things, and this type of ability to focus human attention in ways previously unimaginable. What could we do, or what could we craft beyond like a silly cat video, or another music video from some artist, or what could we craft that would actually be so shareable, so viral, that in fact it would completely shift culture, people, our global economic system. I think it's absolutely possible, and that was me essentially asking people to begin crafting these and deploying them into the noosphere. Noosphere was a term coined in the early, it was like 1916, around there, just to basically give a name to this idea of the sphere of human consciousness encircling the globe. And in my talk, if you watch it, or if somebody hasn't seen it, I actually connect it to a map of the internet, a visual map of the nodes of the internet, which looks very, very similar to the neurons of a brain, a human brain. And I actually put them side by side, and they almost look identical. Yeah. And so to me, it's quite obvious that here we have what could be called a global brain. It's really, yeah. And so just as the human brain works together in beautiful, synchronistic, and magical ways, I think we're reaching the point where we could have this global consciousness that could work together just as effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully expressed and encapsulated. And yeah, for people viewing, I always recommend just go and watch that 13 or 14 minutes from Ian. So Ian, you've been on pretty much sort of, I like the term that you're a media activist, and I feel that we're still short really of real, authentic, beautiful, truthful media. Activist, I don't really necessarily use the word activist, but just people like yourself that are just creating amazing media. But where do you feel, because you've met some amazing people, you've basically, as much as you're a filmmaker, I feel that you're very much you're a voice of, you could say, the emerging paradigm as well. You have a very wise look on it, a very grounded, again, I don't necessarily use the word spiritual, but you really have a grounded view on where humanity is moving in terms of our own evolution. And so, what in this moment now, just where you are, what sort of, in your world at the moment, what's a rising for you? I know you're making some films, as you just said, but in terms of just, do you still see that there's this shift that is happening regardless of whether you and I live or not, and it's not just about being utopian or positive, but that there's a real chance that humans can really wake up to this, just this new idea. I would call it the mind bomb, the love meme, or do you feel that this is just another sort of phase? Where are you at with that at the moment?
Mm-hmm. Do my best. It's obviously the thing I spend the most time thinking about, that how do we capture this moment in time, what cusp are we actually on? And the best way I think I found to articulate it is meeting amazing thinkers like Thomas Hübl and Charles Eisenstein, and people that really have this vision to see with such clear lucidity into this moment in time, the stories that underwrite our civilization and potentially where we're going. And I think my role in this case has become, one, how do I synthesize a lot of these voices into a type of, I almost call it it's almost like a tone, like a sound tone is the only thing I can actually really equate it to, because it's not so much a logical argument per se. But that being said, I did a short with Charles Eisenstein called Sacred Economics, where we actually do go through, a certain amount of articulations of how an economic system could be different. That was actually embodying principles of love and the sacred. But for a lot of people, right, that it still is sort of, that's not the thing that actually they listen for or awaken to. It's much more of a sort of tone, a feeling tone, that just feels more life-affirming, let's say. There's just something about it that feels so deeply in connection with life itself that it feels true. And so where I think we're at actually at this point, you know, if I could sort of articulate the more architecture of what I think the transition is actually about, I think that for about 10,000 years we've been on this shift from primarily nomadic civilization, or I should say pre-civilization. We were mostly nomadic, decentralized peoples that roamed the earth for a long time very successfully. And for whatever reason, we decided to shift, or I shouldn't say we, I should say the people at the time decided to shift towards an agricultural model, which led to things like storing surplus, which led to all of a sudden we could have cities, which led to armies, which led to, you know, all the rest of it. So essentially the civilization as we know it today is actually based on a very new model. I would call it the hierarchical model, where you have, again, somebody at the top or a few people at the top, and then a few under them, and then a wider period under them, and then under them. And that's how we really run our civilization. If you look at you know, political structures, if you look at the corporate structure, all of them are still using a hierarchical model. And you could say it has been actually extremely successful in certain ways to focus human labor and attention upon very specific projects. Like you could not build a giant mega dam without a hierarchical structure of organizing human labor. You could not build, you know, skyscrapers. You know, there's so many things that we have in our world today. I mean, computers, even all of these things that actually, on the one hand, are incredible achievements of human imagination and ingenuity. At the same time, are only possible because we shifted to a structure of organization that allowed us to have that type of intense focus over time. That said, it's obviously come at a huge cost. That the shift away to a more you know, lifestyle, a non-nomadic lifestyle, has, you know, come at a huge cost. Humans aren't built actually for, you know, sitting at a computer certainly for hours at a time. You know, they're not built to as well hoard things, like hoard even wealth, even in the way that we've organized our economic system. And so the way I like to see it is so much of what we pathologize today at the level of the individual, whether it's depression, loneliness, you know, violence at the level, you know, that we see emerging, has come from, you could say, it's because of the absence of a thing, not because of there's something, quote, wrong with the individual in this case. And you could say that it's the absence of having true connection with each other and with the world. Right. That we have, by and large, the dominant culture has no capacity to have, to actually, you could say, teach those within the culture how to be in deep relationship with the world and with each other. Right. And so we're basically left to fend, you know, as best we can in a culture that, again, pathologizes all of these things into the level of the individual, and then you have this mania to try to perfect the individual today, and then you could call it the Enlightenment business, right? It's this idea that somehow you have to reach a type of perfection or transcendence to be of value either to yourself or to others, and it's simply not true. That's not saying, you know, that's not saying you don't have work to do. Everybody has work to do, but at the same time, you can. As my teacher Stephen Jenkinson says, you can proceed as if you're needed, because you are. So the moment in time today is this shift from a hierarchical model of our civilization back into a decentralized model. And we've never done this before on this scale, because you know, we have all of the things that civilization has built, and with that, all of the destruction and all of the you know, loss of biodiversity and all the rest of it. That you know, we're sort of trying to make this shift almost like we're walking backwards into it. Now, there's a lot of people that are becoming aware of this fact. I would say Occupy actually was crucially responsible for, you know, this whole idea of the 99% versus the 1%. Yeah. It was, you know, and that itself was an incredible meme. And a lot of people, again, took that as this, oh, you know, they're saying there's just these very specific, you know, bad people at the top who need to, you know, we get rid of them and everything will be great.
Yeah.
Right? And to their credit, I think most people in Occupy actually understood that what they're trying to draw attention to was it's hierarchical, meaning that if you get rid of that 1%, we'll get a bunch of other 1%ers immediately because the system itself conjures 1%ers.
Yeah.
Same thing that happened in Egypt. As soon as the people essentially got to that moment of now it's time, you know, over to you, the model itself essentially created, it needed people to fill the vacuum quickly in a model that most people had an awareness of.
Yeah,
and so
keep yourself up. Yeah.
So it's the hardest thing we've ever done, and I think that it's much easier to see that as the sort of understanding of the shift that's going on versus this idea that we just all need to wake up and become enlightened, or that, you know, we deserve, you know, total annihilation through Armageddon because humans are terrible and blah, blah, blah. You know, all of these other stories that get layered on based upon whether or not you either love or secretly hate humanity. And most people won't know that that's actually what's happening internally for them. But again, as Stephen Jenkinson says, that he says misanthropy is not getting it. You know, misanthropy is easy. In fact, we're asked to proceed as if we're worthy.
We're asked to proceed as if we're worthy. Yeah.
As if we're worthy, as if we're meant to be here. You know, that's really it's an egoic thing to say in many ways, you know, because usually it'll come from this idea of trying to, you know, I'm here for, quote, a grand, you know, reason, the sort of heroic journey aspect, which, again, it doesn't have to be that big. I mean, you can be unique and just as worthy of being here as, you know, Steve Jobs was. And there's no, you know, there's no disconnect between how important both those people are, I think, to where we're at today. And that, you know, it was Charles actually Eisenstein who has this beautiful story about how, you know, understanding this shift or how to create change is from the old story. We have this idea that if we just apply enough force, right, that this idea that people only change when you apply force. So we have to get a bigger army, or we have to get more people in the streets, or we have to shame, you know, the 1%ers into changing their ways. And he says that's the old story. And in fact, if that was true, there would be no way to create the change we actually need in time, because the fact the old system, the models, and the momentum of the previous system, they have much more at their disposal, both money, you know, an arsenal, and entrenchment within the current system. But thankfully, he says, from the new story, in fact, we're starting to understand change as actually, you could say, acausal. You know, it's synchronistic. In fact, you know, a lot of the change that needs to happen is happening from a type of intelligence that, you know, we can't draw a line of like, oh, well, that led to that, led to that, led to that. You know, it was just this moment in time that somehow magically occurred, which completely reshaped the course of either, could be your life, it could be the life of the person you met, and how does that ripple forward, you know, into the future, or in fact, into the past. And maybe that's another topic we can get into later.
Yeah. That's lovely. I like. Again, I've listened to you speak a few times, so I'm glad that these topics are also coming up, because for me, I've spoke to Charles, as you know, and a few times as well, and the new story, I think sometimes people feel that they're so, I suppose, not involved. I think what I found along the way when I'm meeting people is that people don't feel that they are the creators, or they are worthy, or they are involved in this new story, whereas we're all involved in the story, whether we believe it or not. So, you know, when we can take back that responsibility and realize that, okay, we have a story, we all have a number of identities, a number of beliefs, concepts, theories, ideas, etc. And within that, we can actually almost step back, take an objective look and you know, a witnessing look, and then go, okay, so that was who I maybe was before. That is an aspect of my life. That is a story that I definitely played a role in. But now I can actually become and this is pertinent for mine and yours path, because we're filmmakers as well, is that, you know, I can write a new script. I can be the producer, the director, the lead character and the extras in my movie. I can choose what story I want to be a part of, and that can be very subtle, or that can be dependent on what what energy you want to put into it. So I don't know if you'd like to speak to that, maybe. So from a place of, I know that your contribution to the news story is what you do. You go out, you make films, you meet these beautiful people that also have a voice. Stephen Jenkinson, I mean, what a beautiful man to have met, and I'm sure, and you've made some beautiful films with him, and Charles Eisenstein and a number of others that you've met. So you're part of the story. I'm not speaking for you, but I think you would say is what you're doing now. You're speaking this, you're making films, you're using your skills to be an advocate of change. And I think that maybe people sometimes feel a little bit I don't know, lost and confused, and maybe in that other field of the story that you said, of not knowing what to do. Whereas there are many things that we can do to contribute to this new story. Do you want to talk a little bit to that, and then maybe even that will lead into what you're actually doing now as part of your contribution to the story as well?
Yeah, thank you. During the filming of 1 Week Job, the film with my friend who was looking for his passion, he worked 52 jobs in a year, and he learned a lot about what people valued in the work that they did, and how it was meaningful. And during the course of that, crafting that film, we actually came across a quote which has now become more popular, and maybe I'll take credit for amplifying that into the field, or maybe it was just a quote whose time has come. But the quote was by a fellow Howard Thurman. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive." And for me, that's the beautiful encapsulation of how to proceed in the face of what seems quite a daunting task, or just so big. It's like, where do you possibly feel you could plug in? And
exactly.
So for me, to look out and say, oh, well, I should be, this is usually how the conversation goes internally, right? It's either, who am I? I can't do anything. I'm too busy trying to pay the bills or raise my kids, or what. And absolutely true. There's nothing, I can't say anything about that. Somebody, living today, especially raising kids, is probably the hardest it's ever been in the dominant culture. No question. And so, there's really not much energy or passion left often in those scenarios to be of value or be of service to the world at large. But again, this is looking at it from a perspective of the old system, which says, again, you have to imply force to be of use. And so, or sorry, I should say, it's either force, or you have to be in the spotlight. You have to be, big named celebrity or CEO or whatever. And it's simply not true. I think it's starting to emerge that it's just as important to, again, have the time and space to, say, raise your children in a way that they become deeply connected to, what does it mean to be in a relationship? What does it mean to have an intimacy with the land with which they live? What does it mean to be a parent, an absolutely beautiful, necessary parent today, and to be able to see that just as the most absolutely important thing you could possibly do. And that if that's all you did with your life, again, all you did, that would be absolutely exactly. And so, because I see a lot of sense of, when people are in the street, say, at an action, or, inventing some new, amazing technology, that there is this type of comparison that happens. And, there's this an understanding necessary that, if you look out at nature, and you look out, as I am now behind us, at these beautiful trees, the tree, the big beautiful tree here is not looking at the duck and saying, darn it, I wish I was a duck. Like, ducks are so much cooler, right? Like, look at them, like, flapping around and, quacking. And here I am, just this tree, hanging up here. They don't do that. Or I should say, I suspect they don't do that. Because they realize that, the best possible thing they could be is themselves, and the most, incredible tree that could possibly be in that space in this moment in time. And if you study things like permaculture, which I've just dipped my toe in, I mean, trees themselves are like incredible beings that are billions of uses to so many other, you know, species, and to us and to themselves. I mean, it's, you know, if you look at a tree and you don't follow your needs, you know, it's like you're not paying attention.
Exactly.
So for me, understanding, you know, all of these things going on, that in fact the best thing I could possibly do is to absolutely look out and see what, you know, what needs to be done. You know, what would be what's calling to you, what's most of service for you. But then looking internally and saying, okay, what is true? You know, am I really called to be the activist on the street, you know, holding the sign or chaining myself to the door of the law courts, you know, as they did here in Vancouver recently? Maybe that's true. And if it is, then, you know, I am in awe of your ability to follow that and to have the courage to do that. But again, maybe it's making films. Like, I feel it was clear, you know, and there's a number of events in my life which actually led me to that deep sense of knowing that absolutely this is the most of service I could be. And I don't think it's an accident, though, that at the same time, what ends up being the most of service also ends up being a path of passion and connection and, you know, love and all the rest of it. Like, it's not a coincidence, you know, that I won't say it's quote been easy. Yeah, absolutely not. That, you know, every path has a cost, and that the cost of following, you know, deeply that thread of you know, what you're called to do is it can ask a lot of you, and it often does. I believe it might have been Charles Bukowski who says, "Find what you love and let it kill you."
That sounds like a Charles Bukowski comment.
It does, and in some ways I think that's true. And what I believe maybe he was getting at was that your willingness to continually to pursue that which you're in love with, really, it asks a lot, and in fact probably asks you to, again, continually sacrifice or let go of all of the things around you that are not true, are no longer you, are no longer of service, that are maybe holding you back from going deeper into service. And, you know, that's certainly the path that I've been on, and which very likely will lead you to grief at a certain point. And, you know, perhaps that could be a good segue into the next question.
Yeah, I feel that, and I'm really, I'm for the people viewing this as well. I'm sure they're taking a lot from this, because I love the way that we're weaving this together. So yeah, please continue, because if you're taking it into grief and death and into that, then yeah, please let's go there.
Okay, well, maybe I'll make a quick detour. How about this? Into my other film project. So you know, there's basically the two major projects I'm working on now really arrived through you know, the previous films I'd made, and the first, they're both very intertwined, but I think maybe I'll talk about the first one first, and this is the one that I'm actively in production right now. What happened was I was leaving a thing called the International Indigenous Leadership Gathering in a place called Lillooet, which is in the interior of British Columbia. This is about 2012, actually. And it was actually a place where a lot of Indigenous leaders came to share their wisdom, some of them for the first time. And I helped set up the live stream for that event to bring their talks to the world. And on the way home, actually, I picked up a fellow who he was just attending the event, and he needed a ride back to the city. And we were driving back, and he had my iPod, and he was flipping through my music, and he found an artist named Applecat. And he's like, "Wow, you have Applecat?" And I'm like, "Sure." I didn't remember downloading it, but he's like, "Oh, can I play it? She's awesome." And I said, "Sure." And he played it, and then she proceeded to be this music. It was this hour-long mix of this sort of electronic, sultry, but also like very beautiful weaving that I just thought I heard something in it. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something in it that I just, you know, I was calling. And I from there, you know, I had this other sense in my back of my mind that my next film I wanted to be focused on women. In documentary, especially, there's this kind of ongoing joke among filmmakers that they have a lot of OWGs, old white guys, and so it's good also to have certainly a more diversity of voices in documentary. And so on the one hand, I had this idea. I was like, I really want to do a film focused on women. And two, here's this electronic artist who was weaving this beautiful something, and I didn't know what it was. And those two collided. And soon after, I realized that my next film would be about women in electronic music. And so that started really a 2-year journey up until now, where I began following the thread through the initial artist, Applecat, and then into this whole underground scene of electronic music. At about the same time, I visited Burning Man as well, which is like the epicenter of the electronic scene, and really a petri dish of like experimenting with human culture and other forms of commerce and in terms of gifting and all this stuff. So all of that was really happening, and I decided that I wanted to make this film. And really the undercurrent, and this is what I feel is connected to the wider culture at large, is that by a lot of people would probably agree that the emerging world is feminine. That they would say that it's either led by many women leaders who are finally getting the space held for them to step out, or it's based upon feminine principles. A lot of people have issues with using words like masculine and feminine, and this is also something we cover in the film, because I think what happens is we have this idea that it's split upon gender, that there's this idea that all men are masculine or should be masculine, and then all women are feminine or should be feminine. And we really want to dispel that and try to understand it sort of a bigger container, or a bigger understanding of polarity between what are the qualities that we could say we're giving the label in this case, sort of a masculine, and also this other understanding of the polarity that we're understanding is feminine. And how do they actually support each other, and how are they both deeply necessary in understanding both at an individual level, how does an individual hold both polarities, and when should they drop into either polarity, and how does a culture at large actually go create a much wider space for this principles of the feminine. Because if you look at most say corporate structures or political offices, that by and large they're mostly masculine dominated. I mean, there's really no question there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the previous waves of feminism have actually they've been deeply important, but the big shadow, I think, that's been starting to be understood now is that they really try to get women into the halls of power and into opportunities of equality that men have enjoyed.
Yeah.
But what's happened is many women have had to sacrifice the feminine.
Exactly.
And I'll even say that many men have actually had to sacrifice the more feminine aspects of masculinity to operate in these realms.
Right.
And we're starting to see, of course, that there's a huge loss that happens there, because in fact, if our political offices, if our corporate boardrooms, if they actually were allowing in a type of feminine intuition, wisdom, a much deeper understanding of a relationship both with each other and with you could say, the relation that these entities have on the rest of our world, the natural world, peoples, they would be fundamentally challenged. That, in fact, much of our current structures would not survive if those aspects were allowed in. Which leads me to, the sort of core focus of this film is really about the dark feminine. What is the role of the dark
feminine?
The dark feminine, exactly.
Yeah.
She has different names. The most obvious one that most people know is Kali, from the Hindu pantheon. And what would it mean to allow in the dark feminine as a necessary aspect of the transformation of the human culture and structures that are, in many ways, they're I won't say they need to be dismantled so much as composted. They need to be be allowed to die, really.
Okay.
You know, this is a much different energy than sort of, you know, let's go in and smash it up, and or you know, wait for it all to crumble to the, you know, collapse. You know, these ideas. It's really taking a much more active role in, you could say, the hospicing of these structures and these forms that are just, they're past their time. They need to shuffle off, you know, the mortal coil. And we need to figure out a way, though, to do that in a way that actually honors what they brought, what you know, what was beautiful about them, because there absolutely was. But there's, of course, buried in a lot of destruction and a lot of you know, deep woundedness that most of us experience because of these aspects of the culture. And so that film is looking to probably be released 2016. It's a feature documentary. It's going to be called Amplify Her.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, so when that releases, that's going to be almost a 4-year project.
Yeah. And to be honest, yeah, most documentaries take about 4 years. That's about average. So basically right on track. But I mean, they're a complete, you know, pilgrimage, as they should be, I think. And I think anybody else who's written a novel or, you know, a book at all is really in a similar understanding of really you become just, it's this relationship, this lover of yours that takes that long, you know, to really craft something beautiful together.
Yeah,
but this leads me to,
sorry, carry on.
Oh, just saying, this leads me now to the second film project, and for me they're actually quite deeply intertwined. But it's based on my work with this fellow Stephen Jenkinson, who you know I've mentioned a couple times, and you've mentioned. If anybody's curious, I highly recommend they look at the film "The Meaning of Death," which is a short that I did a little while ago, and it somewhat hints at sort of where his own past. He is a fellow. He's a Canadian who grew up in the suburbs outside Toronto, and he worked in what he calls the death trade for a number of years. He worked in palliative care at a big Toronto hospital for a number of years until, you know, for different reasons he had to leave, and primarily I think because he was asking a lot of questions about the medical system's approach to dying that were somewhat uncomfortable, and the establishment didn't really want to answer, didn't know how to answer, because again it challenged a lot of assumptions around, you know, what does it mean to use these, you know, life-saving technologies, or, you know, with abandon in a sense. He said that, you know, the primary directive of our approach to medicine now is, if you can, you should, and that, you know, that leads to this type of prolonged dying that happens with people, where what is the cost? You know, he speaks of this idea that most people end up dying, not dying. Yeah. As in, they have no time to actually come to dying as a deeply necessary and potentially beauty-making endeavor. And there was a film, National Film Board here in Canada did a film, director Tim Wilson, beautiful film called Grief Walker, where it really looked at that particular aspect of his life, and it shared the stories of individuals that he actually helped to, you know, bring a sense of a bigger story to this aspect of their own personal dying. And I came to Stephen's work also in 2012, so it was a big year, you know, not just for the Mayans, but it was a big year, I think, maybe for a lot of people. And of course the Mayans are going, well, you know, that's just, we ran out of, you know, tablets, but, you know, we're on to the next.
Somebody got to start writing new stories. Carry on. Did I lose you? Hello.
Aha, are you back?
Yeah, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on. Moving on. See, that was the Mayan glitch.
Yeah, that's true. They got a little upset. No. So essentially now, this next project that Stephen and I are working on is looking at, well, what does it mean to approach death and dying from that bigger story? But then asking now a much bigger question: what does it mean to approach the culture from a very similar dynamic. You know, we have this idea that, you know, certainly with the specter of climate change and, you know, ecosystem collapse, and, you know, we have this kind of looming specter of annihilation in the background for most of us. And, you know, talk about overwhelming. It can seem, you know, any particular action you might take a total drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
The actual change that quote is necessary. And in some sense, that's true. But in the other, it's, you know, Stephen has this great way of saying, well, you know, we've always had no time. That in fact, you know, from the much larger, bigger story, that in fact, you know, the momentum of this current arc that humanity is on has been building for a long, long time. Long by human scale, but not long from, you know, Earth time. And that's not to say, therefore, you know, we haven't had an effect. Absolutely we have. But I guess what he's saying is, what is it too late for? Or you could say, where's the question that is it too late? Where is it coming from? Right? Because it comes from this place that, well, we have to do X or else we, quote, will die. But again, now let's take it back to the level of the personal. Right? If I said to you, you're going to die someday, right? Would you say now, well, therefore nothing is worth doing? Well, because I'm going to die. Right? Again, we don't proceed that way. And you could even say, what does it mean to be human, even though you're going to die? Right? So you see again that starts to kind of open up this understanding of where this other question is coming from, which is, you could say, it's coming from the same wounded place. This idea that, oh, well, if we don't do X, it's too late. But the question is always there, which is, well, what does it mean to proceed as humans in the face of this consequence of how we've lived, or where we're at in this moment in time? You could even say, in fact, this is a moment where we are called to be most human, perhaps more human than we've ever been. Now, you know, now you start to get somewhere. Now you start to ask things like, well, what does it mean to actually be human in a time like today? And have we been human in the past? In fact, in that basically deeply lived, have we been our full humanness in the way that we've lived our lives? Does our culture allow us to be deeply human?
Yeah. Do we even know what being deeply human or full humanness? Has anybody ever even asked that question?
Exactly. Now you're getting somewhere.
Yeah, carry on. So this dive with Stephen Jenkinson, the documentary is just based on that thing. Well, I say just. I mean, that's like the ultimate. Yeah. Just a little bit of work that I've, little bit of words that I've listened from your videos of Stephen Jenkinson and some others that I found online. Are just, I mean, he flipped. He's been able. Your videos and his words have been able to flip my whole perception of death. I've always been open to speaking about death, and when I heard there's something, I got so many tingles and sensations from watching The Meaning of Death and then the Making of Humans, the film you made. But this idea that death feeds life and that humans are made. It's like that just changed my whole and dying, and that was it. Dying in the face of dying. But being okay with dying and then acting from that place, that was just, that was so rich for me.
Yeah. Well, let me just add one more thing too. That,
please.
He definitely, there's a nuance with this idea of accepting death, right? That because we sort of again have this idea that, well, if we fight it, or if we come to it from this place of it's deeply not supposed to happen, as we often do, right? We say, oh, well, so-and-so died too early, or it wasn't their time, or they have so much more to live, and all these other things. Right? Basically, what we're saying is it shouldn't have happened, right? And so the opposite of that, you could say, or the more skillful understanding that it sounds like a good idea, is that you have to accept it, that it's natural, that it's part of life, and all the, But what happens is, and this is what Stephen cautions against. He says it starts to domesticate a thing that should not be domesticated, right? Like this, it basically it doesn't allow in the depth of actually how significant it is. And in that way, death should change everything, right? It should change everything because it's that big, certainly in your own life, but even in the lives of those around you. And so I guess I'm saying I caution against the words such as accept, because you can die, you can have a life-affirming death without, quote, accepting it, right? Like accepting it sort of, shuffling quietly off into the ether or something, right? No, it's like you can die loving life. And what does that look like, right? What is that like? Not to look at death as, again, something deeply, tragic that should not have happened, but as something like, all right, your greatest dancing companion, as Stephen might say. So that starts to really change the approach. But in terms of the film project, so this whole idea of, is it too late for Armageddon, and should we be stocking bullets in our bunkers and the whole thing? That to me is sort of where it starts. It's sort of the frame of, again, this question of, quote, what does it mean to be too late, and where does too late come from? And once we kind of get that out of the way and we say, well, wait a second, how does it mean to proceed as humans in this time? One of the big threads that Stephen is completely, almost, it takes a while before people even understand how important or how necessary this aspect is, and this is what I'm talking about, our own connection to our peoples. Those that came from cultures or peoples that, certainly North America, in Europe there's a different story, or you could say that the story of the people that left Europe and came over to North America asks something different of us. What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to be planted? Finally, where we actually are. All these types of questions of learning where you came from, learning your ancestry, learning their stories, learning their songs, like learning their indigiosity, you could say. Like all of these questions are mostly unasked, in this rush to create a sort of oneness of a global citizenship where we are all sort of the same. Like these questions, they're well-meaning, but what happens often is, again, you steamroll diversity, you steamroll the deeply necessary and grief-soaked path of learning where you actually came from, like learning how you got from, in this case from North America, where most of us, your people lived somewhere. In fact, I was just in Scotland and Ireland a few months back, and I actually retread the path to my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and I stood on the grave of my great-grandparents. This is in Ireland, in the Sligo region of Ireland, and I can tell you that it was something like, basically, it wasn't a novelty for me in this case. Like a lot of people have this understanding that they come to this knowing where you came from as a sort of, oh, that's neat, but it was so much more than that. And I'll tell you, because one, I had a deep sense of this idea that the people in North America actually came from somewhere, like that it can be learned, that in fact it's not very long ago that the people on this continent showed up and sort of said, okay, this is ours now. It's one thing to kind of be cynical about it and say, well, then they went around and pillaged and did all this stuff and they're terrible and let's just deal with that, or most people, though, have an innate self-loathing that comes along with that, the unarticulated self-loathing. And what it sounds like, though, is there's nothing good can come where I came from, right? What it sounds like is learning a lot of other esoteric cultures and spiritual practices that come from other places because they feel more real than anything that could possibly come from those that, quote, look like me or have my skin color. That's what it looks like. Because once you actually dig into your own peoples, you start to realize that you came from somewhere and they had a deeply intimate way of being in the world, just as deep and just as meaningful as as we call them, First Nations here in North America have, despite again what those that came over and did their best to stamp it out, continue to have a beautiful way of being in connection with the world that doesn't ask us to go in there and say, teach me, which is another way of saying gimme. It asks us to say, well, wait a second, you achieved this as a people over generations, this capacity. What does it mean for others that came over, and maybe those that still hadn't left? What does it mean to re-achieve that type of connection, that type of intimacy, in their own particular unique expression in people? That's the deeper question. So the film that I'm making with Stephen, is actually based upon going along the journey with these younger people as they actually begin to have that, take those steps on recreating those connections and reweaving the threads with their people.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that, you know, this is are you pointing to this as a personal individual quest, as opposed to, you know, going somewhere and being told about your past and your people's, you know, whether it be through an education system or some person telling you how it is, but this is about individuals going on their own personal, like almost a back journey, right?
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll just add too that as much as it sounds, and it personal is the sense of that it's an individual, you could say, like because we're so lost, you could say, or Stephen has this term, orphaned, because we're so orphaned from our own peoples, that in fact you will be the only one doing this for quite some time.
Right.
Maybe, right? But what I found, and certainly with Stephen's teachings and the way he structured his school, it's called the Orphan Wisdom School, is when you start doing this type of work with others, it may have individual pilgrimages that you might go on, such as, you know, the ones in my family in Ireland. But once you start doing this type of work with other people, oh my God, it's like it starts to create this type of just way of being in the world with others, which you could say, despite the individualized or personalized idiosyncrasies or, you know, woundedness of an individual, it proceeds in a way that you're already worthy enough. And this is why I said that prior, that this idea of how do you proceed in the world as if you're worthy. And what it does is it takes out all of this personalized self-judgment that has no outlet typically, right? And usually turns into this mania of trying to fix yourself, of just another, you know, meditation retreat, or just another, you know, esoteric, you know, learning, and as if there's somewhere to get to. And it takes it out of all that individualized, you know, judgment, and it actually says, well, wait a second, actually the bigger story is how we can be together, and how we can be together and express and articulate our humanness in a way that creates a type of food. It creates a type of food, again, not just for other people, but for everything else that has fed us. Everything, all of the plant peoples, all of the other animal peoples, you know, all of the people that are going to proceed after us, and, dare I say, all of the people that proceeded before us. There is a way of being in the world that, in fact, feeds all of them. And it has very little to do with, you know, the purity of your internal, you know, ability to reach transcendence or enlightenment or whatever. All of that, it becomes secondary to, for instance, your ability to sing a song of your people. However, quote, badly or good you could do it, but the fact that you sang it creates a type of food that is so unauthorized in the way that we proceed in the world now, and certainly in relation to our idea of music and celebrity and quote, what's good or what's bad, right? Like, we're reconnecting all of these aspects, which they're at the end of the day, you know, an individual's personal enlightenment is just it's not that much that you can bequeath to the next generations. You know, there's just not that much there. That, in fact, we start to come around to this idea of what can we actually offer the generations to come, who are certainly going to look back at us and say, you know, what the heck were you guys thinking? What could we offer them that we can actually bequeath? And for me, what I'm deeply starting to understand is it is a living human culture. That's something that we can actually offer that can then be taken up and enlivened and deepened and enriched and then passed on again and again. And that's how you have a culture that is able to exist on this planet in deep connection for thousands and thousands of years, because they passed it on culturally. They didn't pass it on through individualized enlightenments and our atomized selves, which is really the story that it's time to let go of.
Yeah. That's very, very, very beautifully put and interesting to look at. So what you're saying is, if I'm understanding this and hearing you right, is that by doing this work, whether with Stephen or just this work in general, where you're connecting more to the thread of your own creation, your peoples, your tribe, you're not like you said, just the idea of tracking back your family tree and just saying, hey, this was so and so and so and so in my family, but there's something else here. I don't know if we can just touch on it a little bit more. Maybe you distilled it lovely, but I want to distill it a bit more. Is that so? There is individual work that has to take place. I'm totally getting that, and even from my own little research that I've done and so on, there's work that has to take place. An individual has to be at a certain place in themselves to even want to even do grief work, to do this orphan wisdom, to even contemplate what it means to die, to live, and to be part of culture as we know it. But what you're saying is that by going back through the process of our peoples and acknowledging, if I'm right in using these words, acknowledging their existence, acknowledging their lives, their culture, and then by somehow you integrate that within yourself, or just by having the awareness, or like you beautifully said, just by even reciting a song or just bringing that song in, does something within the personal transformation is not always a word I like to use, but like within the individual transformation as well. Am I sort of in the right ballpark?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe I'll add that, because let me say that what happens is there's a type of something shows up, and I'll say that you can see I'm kind of dancing around a certain phrase that again is so unauthorized and would be like a long conversation on top of this, maybe part two, but this whole deeper understanding of it's our relationship to time, for one, as in what keeps us from actually being able to have a deeper lived experience with where we're at now, and in fact all of the beings that actually came before us. And the dominant culture's relationship to time, with this idea of the past being gone, which in fact the future is yet to come. All of these kind of unquestioned understandings are actually a way of keeping us from even imagining, what could be different, what could possibly be different. And so when I say, for instance, that the walking that path and starting to reconnect the threads of your ancestry, I will say only part of it is for you, right? Only part of it's for you. And that's why I caution up from this idea of the hero's journey, and this is again the individual going out there and on their own path of individual enlightenment and all the rest of it. That part of it's for you, but I would say actually most of it is for everybody that came before you.
Right.
Right. And when you look at this, one of the dominant, you could say, maladies of civilization is actually depression, right, and loneliness.
Yeah.
And like, where does that even come from, right? So, as in, how is it possible to conceive that you are, quote, alone when your understanding of yourself actually includes all of your relationships? And again, I'm not just talking about relationships of, quote, your friends and your coworkers, right? What I'm saying is all of the beings that keep you alive, whether I'm talking about the meal on your plate, vegan or not, right? What is it if it includes, the air you're breathing? Where's the acknowledgement of the relationship between, all of the trees that did the work, for you in that capacity? And then beyond that, where did you actually come from? If you learn, beyond, of course, your parents and then your grandparents, and then what region of the world did they actually come from? Maybe it was here, maybe it wasn't, but how did they actually make clothing? How did they tell stories, or what was their cosmology, right? If you start going back far enough, that you start to have this sense of kinship with people, all these people that came before you.
Yeah.
That in fact, your capacity to be alone becomes just so obviously like you have to try really hard after that to be alone.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of a sudden now you're surrounded and you're held in a way that, again, is so it's so unauthorized to even consider, that now you proceed as if you're worthy. Because if all of these other beings thought that you were a good idea, then clearly you're here for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And you best get about doing that.
Yeah, beautifully. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that and just distilling that part to it as well. So there really is, if we choose to take that choice, there really is a real opportunity to heal, accept, well, let's be careful with that word, but I would go heal, acknowledge, and then allow a birth of a culture, almost like a culture of a, it feels like a whole new awareness, or a heightened awareness, and also a heightened everything you've shared tonight, which is really wonderful. I want to acknowledge you for just, I've really wanted to just give you the space to share tonight as well, and it's been really lovely for me just to listen and to absorb what you've shared. It's really, really wonderful, because the way that you've articulated yourself is shown that there is a different, almost the word education is arising for me, like, and there's a new education of how we can, on all of it, on all levels, from just the way that we interpret just life in its full essence, from the life, the death, the way that we are in culture, the way that we are in media, the way that we're telling our stories, the way that we connect with our children. I love what you shared around, that parenting and just I suppose that worthiness, and the way that we have, again, sometimes people get scared with the word responsibility, but if we choose to have responsibility as individuals to really step into that worthiness, and like you said as well, it's not about whether you need to be Steve Jobs or not, just which even in your community, your area, your town, your home, that you matter, you have something to give, you have a voice, and I feel really, just really inspired the way that we've danced through all of that. And I love as well the film that's coming, the one with the electronic music, and how that's birthing through from the voice of the feminine and the darker feminine aspect as well, sort of allowing. Again, I love how you articulated that. Just it's not about rubbishing or getting rid of anything. It's about honouring, and there's a sacredness in what you're sharing and what you're expressing. So I really want to just acknowledge all of that and just say, awesome, and love this conversation.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I really enjoyed myself too.
Yeah, it's been great. I know it's just over an hour, so I think I mean, unless there's, I think we've really dropped some seeds there, and there's a lot of food for thought. I feel that there's a lot there for people to absorb and digest. Unless there's anything that you feel that you would like to throw in at the end there, but I feel very nourished.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I might just recommend that. I'm sure people will, or you'll post a link maybe, but a lot of my short films, almost all of them, are on my website, ianmack.com, and also some writing. I mean, particularly the aspect of time that we just talked about. The film Interstellar actually just triggered so much that I felt was not being spoken to, and I wrote like a 8-page essay specifically on the aspect of time and ancestry that is posted on the site as well. So any of these topics that people really want to dig into, at least how I've continued to extrapolate on, they're all on my website. So I recommend people check that out. And my newsletter, you can see a link on there as well. And I do it once a month, and it's all of the latest work shows up there.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and all the links, as always, are underneath this video. And for most of you that have probably watched this, you'll see this. You'll see that I always send stuff out about Ian as well. Ian, just to read, you said Interstellar was a film that you made, or you were sparked by something and wrote something for that?
Yeah, sorry. Interstellar is the new Christopher Nolan film.
Okay.
And with Matthew McConaughey, and it's quite, people have accusations of a little sentimental and things like that, but there's a lot there that actually is, you could say, just below the surface that I suspect even the filmmakers didn't realize interjected. And perhaps a future topic is actually looking about how is it possible that the future could actually be interjecting mind bombs on the present. Because I absolutely think that Interstellar is one, Avatar is one, and you know, it's possible to understand how that, one, could happen, and two, why it's happening. So I'll just leave that as a cliffhanger for now.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. But we can access some of your thoughts on your website through that. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Wow. I'm in a very beautiful place on a small island somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean, and wonderful Ian is looking at a magnificent lake, and we just come together. I've been trying to get hold of Ian for a while, and it's so beautiful that we kept in contact, and we can bring this conversation to you this evening. Yeah, nothing much to say. Which is a first for me, and I like to just absorb these conversations. This is one I'll be listening back to as well, and so please share this with your friends, subscribe, have these conversations yourself, explore the people that we've spoken about tonight, Stephen Jenkinson, Charles Eisenstein, many others, and go over to Ian's website, and just know that we are surfing on the cusp, the edge, the wave of some really phenomenal things unfolding in my mind. And I'm happy to bring these conversations to you. So wherever you are in the world, do not feel alone, because as Ian just said, it's not possible. It's not possible when we go deeper into what it means to be alive. So lots of love to you all out there. Thank you so much again to Ian for giving us his time this morning. Good luck with your films, and I speak to you all very, very soon. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Simon.